flying saucer? Oh my God. I'm not even kidding. That is a flying saucer.
What kind of wine do you have?
Oh, I classify wine in two different kinds. The one that costs less than $4 and the expensive one. So I went for this is like 11.
Wow, big spender.
I
mean, the topic is Scott Wolter, so spare no expense.
Yes.
Right? Am I right? I don't know how we get through this. I know you guys started like talking about preparing and reading stuff. And like, I thought about it today. Like I took the day off work, not for this, but for other, because I wanted a day off work. So I took a vacation day. I rode my motorcycle around and I thought, well, I'll still have some time. Well, I'll still have some time. Well, I'll still have some time. And like, here we are. And like, I have done nothing. Like, I'm just going to pull it out of my ass because it's Scott Wolter and I'm not going to give that guy 2 calories of thought. Well, some of you guys posted he's looking for alien stuff now, right? Which has been a thing. Like he's gone down that path. I think that like the Templars got kind of boring, so you know you have to keep adding into the soup.
I don't know if you can ever get him away from the Templars. I mean, I won't be surprised if we find out that Templars are from the Pleiades or something in the future, but it's always going to be Templars.
He has hitched the Templars to Atlantis, so the Templars now have Atlantean knowledge. That's what they're protecting. So I know that he's trying to ride that horse, I guess.
So I'm looking at the thing we posted the other day it was on the Fraudulent Archaeology Wall of Shame. No plug intended. 150,000 members plus and growing.
Gotta get those numbers down.
I don't want to call them tablets, but they were stone pieces of rock that somebody scratched into, and he was dating those. But he didn't say how he dated them.
Like, I mean, he was like an A-lister for a while. Like, America Unearthed was a pretty popular show as far as those shows go. You know, and it had, what was it? It was more than one season, so it was at least 2 seasons. I don't know whether season 3 it had run its course, like kind of run out of gas at that point. But you know, I mean, he had it going. The guy is he's telegenic, like he's good looking, he's very masculine, he talks forcefully and like, but like, is that it? You know, like where's the beef with Scott Wolter? And Pablo's nodding his head, but one of my friends on the fringe side, who shall remain nameless, he told me, I asked him about Scott Wolter, and he's like, I don't know whether the kids still say this, but he's like, he's got no game. He ain't got game. Like he's just like an empty shirt that just like Knights Templar, Hooked X, you know, Coffee Cup Masters. I just don't know what's there, and like that's why I kind of stopped paying attention to him. But once in a while, like, you know, he was at the last Cosmic Summit. I saw a little short with him talking about Templar knowledge and the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, of course, and Atlantis and all this kind of stuff. And
this summer at the Cosmic Summit, Scott Wolter will reveal jaw-dropping new information about the Western tradition and secrets of Atlantis as protected for centuries by the Templars and Masons.
Now with the aliens, so like maybe he just keeps on doing that and just chasing whatever he thinks is going to get him on TV again. I don't know.
A little bit of a recap, let's say. If I remember correctly, the big deal with the Knights Templar was that they were in search of the Holy Grail and probably the Ark of the Covenant. I don't remember. But what I don't get is he saying that they came here to the Americas at some point? And is he saying that they came from Atlantis? Because that would be, I mean, a huge stretch. Like, big.
I mean, I feel like he got his foothold with the Kensington Runestone, right? Because he's a geologist by training, and so he thought he could prove that it was legitimate just by the geology, by how much the runes had worn. I guess I think so. This is where I should have done some homework, but like I said, I didn't. So I can't remember exactly what his argument was, but the runes are worn enough that they couldn't have been carved fresh in the mid 1800s. Like they would have had to have been, at a earlier time, which matches up with the date. And the Kensington runestone, I think he interprets as a Templar land claim, that they put the rock there, and therefore they could show that they had a claim to that part of the continent, and that's why it's being suppressed, because it would throw a monkey wrench into all of this stuff, which of course is nonsense. And I remember when I taught my class, there are people who are scholars in that rune and the runes of that age, and they are convinced that it doesn't make any sense, and that falsifies it. And there are other geologists who have looked at it and go, no, what he is saying is complete garbage. It makes no sense. And those people were pretty convincing to me. So I don't know if he's still on the Kensington runestone or not, or whether it's just one of those things where it's like, it doesn't matter whether we can all show that it's garbage. We're just going to pretend that didn't happen, and now we're going to move on and try to build more on that.
Well, I think he certainly defends it. He still defends the Kensington runestone, and I've seen him do that a couple of times. But yeah, there's been so many people that have come out and said, yeah, the runes don't match, the linguistically and the style of runes are not correct for the period and everything. There's been quite a few problems, but not to mention the fact that the guy that had him had a kind of a bias. He was into the runes already and into the kind of thing, and claimed that he wasn't. And then all of a sudden, he's got all these books and everything. And some of the inscriptions, the words that were in there, the runes that were in there, were actually in his books that he had, and that kind of thing. There was some pretty good stuff that came out about it recently.
About the Kensington runestone?
Yeah, it was a new booklet or a manuscript that was found that had that style of writing. Right. It was almost verbatim what was on the some of the stuff that was in the runes. So it was the same exact runes, and it turned out they were available,
right,
guys, when they were creating it.
Right. I need to refresh my memory on those details too, because that was always one of his arguments. Is like, well, we hadn't discovered these runes until much later. So Olaf, whatever his name was, the guy who was the purported carver, could not have had access to that, and could not have known. Therefore, he could not have faked the stone. And in fact, there are contemporary sources that have those same things in them that he probably very well would have had access to. So that kind of really, really weakens that argument. And if I remember the geology part, it was that part of the stone has like calcite on it, which is soft, and it would have eroded at a different rate. And the runes that are carved into that are just as sharp. They're not like super blurry. They wouldn't have eroded already. And if they would have been below ground, it had been interacting with the groundwater. And I'm just like, I don't quote me on the details. I don't remember, but it was something about there should have been differential weathering in those two different kinds of minerals that were part of the rock, and they weren't, which suggests that it can't be old, I think is how that argument went. And that was a guy who argued with him quite a bit, and who I talked to, and I think I had him do something with my class also. What was his name? There was a rune guy and there was a geology guy, and I know Scott Wolter hates the geology guy because I think they used to work together, and then one of them, there was some kind of personal falling out, professional falling out or whatever. So there was like bad blood there, and you could feel it when they would talk back and forth.
Richard Nielsen, I think it was.
No, Harold Edwards. Harold Edwards was the geology guy.
For real.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I honestly, I got bored of the Kensington runestone. I've probably still got a folder this thick of Kensington runestone literature. And it's like, oh, geez, I don't want to talk about this thing anymore. It's so stupid. So I'll put it in a box and send it to one of you guys. I'll send it to you, Carl, along with your Hercules figurine that I still owe you from winning that Photoshop competition. That's in the barn.
I'll stick that on the back of my chair or on the nail book or on the bookshelf.
So, J.A., you have not chimed in at all.
Well, all of the stuff that he has is just, it's ridiculous from point A. There's just nothing there. the Kensington Runestone, I remember that being when I told you my father was into all of this stuff. He had treasure magazines, and I remember that being on it. It's been debunked I don't know how many times, and they just keep going back to it. And the alien thing that somebody posted, the little alien with the little elongated eyes, those elongated eyes weren't even in anything until I think the first time we see it in any art or anything is what was it? Not Twilight Zone, but one of the other ones, something Shield. But it was the first time they started doing the elongated eyes. And then you see Barney Hill come up with this, and then other things. So these, gray elongated eyes are recent.
Yeah, 1950s or later.
Yeah. And if you're going to have if an alien culture actually came to Earth, would it really look? I mean, H.G. Wells killed them off with a bacteria or, little bug that got them, little germ. It's just illogical. It's just, and they're going to draw these little figures that are so, I can't draw worth, and I could draw that.
Yeah.
They're bad.
What I find interesting is these are all ideas that are just they come around full circle, and they get repackaged and repurposed and repositioned towards consumers. These are consumers. Don't make no doubt about it. These are people who are paying for media, buying books and magazines and that kind of thing. But these all things were out there. I mean, Eric von Däniken was talking about this stuff back in the 60s. It was 8 or 9 when Chariots of the Gods come out in English, and he didn't even come up with some of this stuff. He was regurgitating things that he had heard and read, but he literally said, the aliens came to the Earth and had intercourse with people. I think he said 4 million years ago. I think is 2 or 4 million years ago, which would have been Australopithecines. So, I mean, he literally said they had intercourse. So you have to wonder, what goes through an alien's mind. It's a long trip, I guess.
Yeah, Lucy's hot. Have you seen the reconstructions? Come on.
But it was, Carl Sagan was the one that really pointed out how ludicrous it really is scientifically. When you think about, an alien coming from a foreign planet, foreign solar system, even a perhaps a galaxy or across the universe, wherever, we are more likely to have sex with a petunia and produce a result than an alien is to have sex with anything on Earth and create an offspring. So it's more likely we could. I think Carl Sagan said petunia.
I feel like this conversation could go off the rails really, really quickly here.
But the whole
Pablo, I'm waiting for Pablo to chime in.
While I say this, I have. It was Haley Ramsey that posted how she had Scott Wolter's. She hung out with Scott Wolter and some other guy. She called them goofballs. I think that was the most real thing she said on Twitter. But they've got these tablets, they're these pieces of stone that are inside, and I'm looking at one of them, and it has these alien type beings, and they have the eyes that you mentioned. But those eyes actually, we do see that in antiquity in the Neolithic. People use cowrie shell eyes, and so there are people who will argue that those cowrie shell shape or something are indicative of aliens. But reality is they use the cowrie shell also to depict the vagina as well as eyes. So it really, depended on what they were trying to, it was just something in nature that they could put on choroplastic art, the little figurine that they were creating. But then slowly, as figurines became more popular, instead of the cowrie eyes, they kept that same eye figure, and you see that in the Neolithic of Bosnia, which ironically that's where we have the Bosnian pyramid. But there's some really good Neolithic art in that area that has those shapes of eyes. The name of it eludes me right now. So people pick up on that and they draw this. And I'm looking at this piece of art, and it's really interesting. And it almost looks like they have one Anunnaki looking like figure passing a mummified figure, I don't know, like in a sarcophagus kind of looking thing, to another little dude with the same shape eyes, and there's nothing looks like anything. I mean, it looks like straight out of somebody's imagination, and a little bit of Stargate.
It was a few years ago when he and Hutton Pulitzer were still together that they had some tablets like that also. I don't know whether they're the same ones, but I'm sure that video has disappeared. But I should go back and check, because I did a YouTube video about that where they were looking at something that had, a pretty obvious, like, fake, stupid, really poor looking artifact, and it had alien stuff on it, and they were talking about it, and it was absolutely 100%. And again, I don't want to quote him, because I'll quote him wrong, because I haven't listened to it in a long time. But
What do you see on the top of that artifact? First off, you see that face. Look up on top. A flying saucer? Oh my God. I'm not even kidding. That is a flying saucer. Okay. Now I'm going to flip it around. What do you see there? You see a planet exploding. What the heck? Is that incredible? So we've been looking at all these cool artifacts that absolutely were dug up out of the ground, no way to fake it, come out of the ground, and they actually have ships on them, exploding planets, various different...
Okay, all these artifacts that we were looking at came right out of the ground, no way to fake it, absolutely legit. Scott Wolter's holding it up. A flying saucer?
yeah, I feel like, you put candy in front of these guys, and like they just cannot keep their hand out of the candy bowl. Like they cannot resist. They cannot go, wait a second, someone's trying to put one over on me, or this can't be right. Like,
Well, I remember it was just a couple of years ago that somebody, Walter, tweeted, "I just got this in the mail, and I can't wait to see what secrets it unfolds." And it's this, well, I don't know.
I have one.
You see my that little skull right there? It's sitting on a notebook. I bought the same one from Alibaba or AliExpress for $5. And
You
he has,
got yours for $5? Yeesh.
yeah, I was trying to find the cheapest one I could find.
I got ripped.
Yeah, that's the same one you have.
Does yours have Templar secrets in it? Templar secrets, or is that like an upcharge?
Mine does.
Alien.
Mine has Templar secrets in it. I wrote them.
Disappearing ink, the lemon juice trick. Remember that?
I wrote them in regular ink so you could see them. Yeah.
RH negative.
Yeah, whatever happened to that? I mean, that was like the next thing. That was it, right? And that was debunked like within 30 minutes.
Everybody said that from AliExpress, dude, and he was like, "Nah, man, you don't understand. It's the content."
It's the content in this brand new notebook that has the Templar secrets. It's not the actual notebook. You dummies. You stooges.
So yeah, so I think he's been. I think these are more. Once I saw that, I was like, "No, I should send him some stuff. I should just make some stuff and send it, and just see what."
I cannot count the number of times I've had that feeling. It's like, you guys will. There's not like a filter that has even 1% effectiveness to like. I was thinking about this though, and in America on Earth, like there were a couple of episodes they did where they did actually debunk something. Like he didn't accept everything. And I remember one of them was Rockwall, Texas. They had a guy come in and they looked at the paleomagnetic stuff or something like that, and this geologist was like, no, it's all oriented the same way. If they were bricks, they would be oriented different ways. And it's like, okay, so that's legit. That worked. And the other one was like, I think he did not accept Burroughs Cave because he looked at a piece of carved marble from there, and it was obviously the back of a tombstone, like a modern tombstone that had been taken and carved, which obviously you cannot have an Egyptian artifact carved on an 1800s tombstone. Like that would not work. So even Scott Wolter was able to, see past that one. Those are the two that I can think of. So I have to give him some credit. that happened, but it's not a very high bar.
But is the idea of the runestone that Europeans were here before Columbus?
Yes.
Sorry. One more question. One more quick question. And the other thing is that what else supports that idea? Because if it's just the one thing, or is there something else?
There's never anything else.
For the Kensington Runestone, it was just the Kensington Runestone all by itself in a field, and this dude was out supposedly clearing his field, which is what people do, farmers, so they can, and that's how you end up with. In New England, they end up with rock walls that they move all the rocks to one central location, and then the forest grows back in 100 years, and then you get guys come back and say, "Look at what there's monumental architecture." But in the Midwest, you don't have trees coming back like that, so you have these these stones. He pulls them out, but he was pulling out a stone apparently, and found the runes. Showed it to his family and friends, and they kept it a secret for a couple of years, and then revealed it supposedly. But there's actually was revealed like twice. There's 2 stories of it, and it was revealed one time, and then a few years later it was revealed again. So there's 2 parallel stories. They didn't really quite get them straight, and that's always been a suspect thing of it too. But the idea was that you have all these Scandinavians living in this area, and this is in the 1800s, so 1862, 1890, 1878, 1890s. You've got all these Scandinavians living in this area, so there are land claims that Native Americans are. You have the Dakota War of 1862 is happening, so these kind of things influence people to say, well, I have a right to be here because my ancestors were here, and here's the reason why. And that's a lot of pseudo-archaeology just comes back to that. And so in 1862, there was a really harsh winter and a crop failure. So members of the Eastern Dakota were in hard times. So they attempted to really drive some white settlers in the area to drive them out of the Minnesota River Valley, and they attacked a bunch of settlers, and it was pretty bad. There was a response, and so these kind of things popped up, and it was just a few decades later when the guy Oman, I think is his name, he immigrates to Douglas County, and so there's still rumblings of this stuff happening, with the Native Americans is still going on. So he wants to seek his claim to the land, and that stone is what he, probably what he thought would do it. I mean, that's my guess. I mean, it's anyone's real guess. There are people who will say, no, you shouldn't badmouth the guy. His family's really nice. I'm sure they are. I'm sure he was a really nice guy. But you do what you do to care you and yours, when times are hard. But yeah, the idea of the Kensington Runestone, the runes themselves, let me see if I can find what it's supposed to say. 8 gates and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland to the west. We had camped by 2 skerries, 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out to fish one day. After we came home, we found 10 men red of blood and dead. AVM, Ave Virgo Maria, save us from evil. We have 10 men by the sea to look after our ships. 14 days travel from this island in the year 1362. Just that wording alone has some problems with it, apparently. I think the AVM, Ave Virgo Maria, has some issues. And then the date, 1362, didn't match up with the style of runes. And so, I mean, it was things that went back and forth. And I think Wolter, explained away, hand waved some of that away. But ultimately, I think you can't really hand wave most of this stuff away. There are some problems with it. I highlighted blood versus blood. The way it was written wasn't in keeping with the writing of the style of the time, the linguistic styles of the time. and so was some of the other letters. They weren't in keeping with the linguistic style of the time, but they were very much in the style of a rune, a teaching for kids that came out for modern Scandinavians. That book came out, and it was very much consistent with that, and almost the exact same runes were found in this book, and some of the same lines are found in there as well. So, and this was dated from like in the 1870s or something like that, mid 1800s, much later runes. Pretty interesting stuff when you read. And I tried to capture as much of that in my blog post on the Kensington Runestone as I could. I thought the more I read about it, and it took me, honestly, I read about the Kensington Runestone and some of the related stuff. I mean, it sends you down rabbit trails when you start reading about this stuff. And probably a month or two before I ever wrote this blog post.
There's a lot to read on that thing. And I went to it with an open mind, like seriously. And I'm like, well, I mean, we know that the Norse made it over here, and it's totally plausible. They could have gone up the Great Lakes. Like, it could happen, right? So like I looked at it, and I looked at it with as open a mind as I could. But ultimately, like it just fails on several levels. And I think going back to Pablo's question, is that it? So like you have this party of 10 guys here, 10 guys there, 20 guys, like, so it's multiple tens of people trekking across. They don't create a single archaeological site that anybody has ever found. They didn't break a pot, they didn't lose a tool, they did none of that stuff. They never started a fire somewhere, that would date to that time period.
You didn't find a big Viking corporalite or anything.
Nothing. No big Viking turds, nothing. And like when I was talking with this about, I think I was talking to maybe Jim Vieira about this when I was down in South Carolina. And one of the things that some of those guys were doing down there, the real archaeologists, is they were looking for De Soto's party, who went across the Southeast. He went up through Florida and over to Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And they were finding sites where there were pieces of iron from Spanish tools that were taken, and they were broken into little pieces, and they were turned into, tools by Native Americans. And like, they were finding this stuff, and like, that's what it looks like when you have a party like that with people going in there with horses and wagons and other things, like how they would need to travel. And it's like, it's ephemeral, but like, we can see it. So you're going to tell me there was this whole Norse occupation of the Great Lakes, and we find one fucking carved rock, and that's it. Like, it's always a carved rock without context. And Carl, like, you have excavated in Eastern North America, and so have I for decades now, through layers of soil that would have this stuff in them. And I know people like none of us have ever found anything in context that looks like a Norse artifact that would date to like the right time and the right place. And we've looked at sites that date to that time period. 1362, sure. There are sites all over the Great Lakes that date to the 1300s, all over the place. None of them have a single artifact on it that could be a Norse item. None of it. Does that mean it doesn't exist? No, but I mean, come on. At some point, like, you have to say, there's no Martian artifacts there either. Like, what kind of argument are we making here?
So talking about several artifacts, if you ever have a chance, if you're traveling west of Memphis, and you're going on I-40, you'll see a sign that says Parkin 12 miles. Take that trip 12. It seems more than 12 miles for some reason. It seemed like a long 12 miles. But you get to the end where Parkin is, a little town called Parkin. They have an archaeological museum, and it's mostly a prehistoric museum. They have the Parkin was the home originally of a palisaded village that De Soto visited, and it's one of the best evidences of De Soto in the Mississippi area, off the Mississippi, because they found dating to that period, they found a trade deed and a little bell. So they found a couple of trade items. So if you have those two, I mean, who knows how many trade items he left, but you found those two trade items. Those Vikings are not coming across without something to trade with. They know there's people they're going to trade, and they're going to want to trade their items for either passage or for goods themselves, and so you're going to see Viking items showing up in Native American sites, and we don't see it.
No, they're totally invisible. Like they would have to be the cleanest, stealthiest party ever. And like Scott Wolter, I think, would make the argument, as would a lot of these guys, that this wasn't the first time, because they were mining copper, in the Upper Peninsula and since the Bronze Age. So where are any of those sites? Like there are none.
Where's all the bronze they made? Where are the copper ingots that didn't make it back to the boat? Where are all so
it's ridiculous. The lack of positive evidence is astounding. And for these guys, it's a total fairy tale, and they're just, using it to sell books and to keep their careers going. But if you step back and look at it, you're like, this is so ridiculous. Like, why are we even talking about this? Like, it makes no sense. It's always a stone with carvings on it that anybody could have done. Nobody knows where it came from. It's a he said, she said kind of situation, or it's some other out of place artifact, like a Roman coin or something stupid like that, or the dumb sword. That's it. That's the sum total, of the quote unquote evidence. And it's ridiculous, and they want to be taken seriously. You can hear, it gets me, it's so stupid. And that's why, I took the day off work and I'm having a drink, because how else do you manage?
Yeah, it makes me think
nothing.
of the famous claim of the Grand Canyon thing, that people claim, and we know that it's a hoax, and the whole thing, but they claim that, or the believers think that the Egyptians made it to the Grand Canyon. But what happened between the Grand Canyon and wherever they landed in the Americas? Because there should be a trail that can be followed of, they say here, they say here, they say here. There are some objects here too. It's not that they were carrying all the gold and all the. They didn't drop anything. They didn't. They can't. So is it they parachute thing? How does it work? And I would say it's kind of the same thing with the stone. Which way did they go?
Pseudo archaeology from above. From above, and we're parachuting.
It's like Red Dawn. It's Red Dawn. They parachuted in, took over before anybody could do anything. Wolverines!
For the mining up in Superior, I think he's using the quote unquote ship over at Copper Harbor. Then carved in rock again, ship. Yeah. And he said that it has square sails, so that's obviously Minoan.
Minoan. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Minoan. So that's it. So that's the whole thing. That's the proof. The evidence is one petroglyph. That's what we got.
Yeah. And it looks awful new. I'm just going to say that. It looks very, very new.
Did he authenticate that with his...
I think he said it was at least 1,000. I can't remember BC or AD. But he said at least 1,000. And then I kind of phased off from watching it anymore. It was like, okay.
He had an episode on that, I think. And I'm trying to... I thought I wrote on that. I don't see.
You probably did.
You probably did.
They have that. They have.
It's so easy to forget this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I know Sarah Head wrote about it or had it on her show. Her, Ken Fader, and Jeb Card had that show for a while, the Archaeological Fantasies, and they talked about it.
I was just remembering. So I have my copy of the Kensington Runestone Compelling New Evidence that I ordered off of eBay or something when I was teaching that class, and I felt like I needed. It's a signed copy. Let me see if I can get this on there. There you go. So to Pat and Don, warm regards, Scott Wolter. So Scott Wolter signed this, autographed it to somebody, and they sold it on eBay to me for like $10. So there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of pictures.
It's $1 less expensive than my wine.
Has a lot of Post-it notes. Did I put those in there? I guess I must have.
I love looking at used bookstores for books like that. I recently had a friend whose father passed, and he had a huge collection of Edgar Casey books and that sort of thing. And I've got the whole collection now.
Oh my God.
The original from the 1960s. These things, lots of Lemuria, the church word stuff, Moo, those kinds of books.
There's a lot.
Some of them are in really bad shape. I got to figure out. I'm gonna find some. They're paperbacks and they're falling apart. So I gotta find some curation for them. But
any of them like signed or anything, or
they're signed. Unfortunately, I went through a lot of them and looked to see if there's any margin notes. And I love going to. One of the things I've always wanted to do is write a paper about margin notes in library books. Archaeologists can be harsh to each other, which is another reason why there's no such thing as a consortium or cabal. Yeah, they can be really hard on these guys are friends, and this guy was really brutal.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to the world of like actual science. Like that's what you do. It's ideas have to survive scrutiny. And I will hand it to Wolter. Like he latched onto this runestone, and he defended that sucker and developed his case, like in a way that a lot of these guys do not. Like they will just assert something and then just move on. But like he stuck to it. He authored multiple books, I believe, and he made his name on that. So for whatever that's worth, you got to give him that one. Like he had his thing and he carved it out and he went with it. Doesn't mean he's right, but he does have a little bit of stick-to-itiveness, at least, and a thick enough skin. So I give him points.
I suspect he's a guy I could sit around and drink a beer with easily.
Yeah.
Pretty cool dude. But I always found the relationship between him and the other guy,
Hutton Pulitzer?
Putzler.
I think that's his name.
We're not supposed to say his name. I think
it doesn't matter. You cannot. He tried to trademark his name. If you want one like prime indicator that you're off your rocker, trying to trademark your own name so nobody can badmouth you, is it? Anyway, proceed, Carl. Proceed.
when they were like buds for a while, and then I don't know what happened, but I think I don't know who found out whose politics first, but clearly they're on different spectrums of the political, ideology scale, and so I think I could get along with. Not to say which is which, I think I could probably get along with Scott Wolter a lot better than I probably could.
Yeah, I don't. So that whole thing, that joining of those two into. So they had like this logo. I think it was like Explorer or something, and the X was like the hooked X, like that's what it was. Like that happened the same time. If you remember, like he was supposed to come and do my class, like come there and like give a lecture, and then he pulled out of that, and it was the same time. And I have a feeling that Pulitzer did whatever, and then like I wrote Scott at one point and said, are you aware that because Hutton Pulitzer had like that Solomon's Secret book that he was like taking money for that never came out or whatever, and like because I know that Pulitzer is watching me again because I did a couple videos about him. So anyway,
you've been threatened to be sued more times than I have, which I feel kind of bad about. I'm working on it.
It's easy. It's the getting a lawsuit threat from Hutton Pulitzer is probably one of the easiest things I've done in my professional career. I could get one tomorrow. Come on. Yeah, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll edit my parts out, but not your parts.
But
you'll hear from Steve Green tomorrow. He'll be calling you.
He doesn't threaten to sue you through his attorney. He threatens to sue you. He CCs his attorney because if he does it through his attorney, it costs money. I think
Yeah. I got one email from Steve Green, and it was ridiculous. I still have them somewhere, and I'm going to get back into that stuff at some point. But I published part of it because it's like this is a letter I got from an attorney, and like Steve Green wrote me after. They said you have to take my name off that. And I was like, this is from you, right? Like you said this. Like I'm not changing. Like so,
right?
And that's still like unbelievable. I'm not even going to talk. No, Marzulli. I'm going to keep. It's happening again. Pablo left.
He had to
See
get
him back there.
more $6 wine. Yeah, I recommend, Pablo. I recommend a wine. It's a label called 19 Crimes.
Oh yeah.
I believe it's owned. The vineyard is owned by Snoop Dogg, I think. One of their Pinot Noir is, man, it's awesome.
They have several different ones, and I've liked all of them that I have tried. And the label is cool too. I'm a wine label guy. Like I like a good graphic on there. I don't know why. I guess, but
well, if you buy a wine, and my theory is if you get a wine with a good graphic on it, it's probably you're not going to put a nice label on a cheap bottle of wine. You might, but not for long. It's like a cigar. If you get a cigar with a pretty decent wrapper, pretty decent label on it, it's probably a decent cigar. If it's got a cheap label, it's probably cheap. Oh, it might not necessarily. I've had some wines that had pretty plain labels on and been surprised. But generally, I always go, most people don't know wines anyway. So if you get a really cool label, that's all they see.
Yeah.
So
that's probably me.
I tell my daughter, if you're going to come to a dinner party, bring a bottle of wine, and if you don't know what to get, just get something with a cool label on.
Yeah, that's what I do. Looks good. That's like half of it. I mean, that's Scott Wolter in a nutshell right there. It looks good. The dude looks good, right? He's a good-looking guy. Scott, you're a good-looking guy. You win. Winning. J.A., you're shaking your head. You don't think Scott Wolter's good-looking?
I'm still on some of the other parts of that you're talking.
We can't, this is the third time we've done this. There's no way I can take this topic seriously. I'm sorry. The guy he is who he is.
It's so silly. I mean, I don't see one. I kind of glanced through I didn't watch the series. I don't have enough marshmallows to throw at the screens to watch these series, but I watched bits and pieces of it. And how can things that he has no idea about and he's an expert in, it's just.
Yeah, I mean, his go-to move was to point his finger and say, "They're trying to hide this from me." I mean, that was, it was just like this manufactured drama.
And it was also silly. It's just they make this big dramatic thing, and they always have this one person. At least the video that I watched, where I think it was a female in this case, she would give him the questions that he had the answers to. So it's it's so set up. It's not somebody you're interviewing or somebody that you have just met in someplace out in the boonies. It's so. I don't even see one thing in any that he's done really that would be different, unique, something that maybe you can't answer, but everything he has is answerable. I'm sorry, but there were no Vikings or Templars at 1000, whatever it was, BC, whatever he's trying for in the new dates.
Nobody ever makes it this far into the video. You can say whatever you want. Nobody's watching. It's fine. It's fine. Totally fine.
Oh, geez.
What else is new in pseudo-archaeology?
Is there anything ever really new?
No, it's all regurgitated. Very rarely new.
Well, I had hope. I had hope yesterday when I was chatting with a guy or discussing, in one of those Facebook groups, and he told me that he was in the military, stationed in the Grand Canyon, to take care of the objects in the cave.
Really?
So I asked him, okay, so where is the proof? Let's see. Don't you understand? So send me a picture of him wearing fatigues.
Ask him what his MOS is.
His what?
What was your MOS?
MOS. Okay.
Called Military Specialty. This is one thing I use whenever I go to an intersection. There's a guy help out a vet, and if I've got any cash with me, I'll stop and I'll say, "What was your MOS?" And if they go, "Huh?" I see you. But if he says something like, 81 Bravo, I'd give them $5 or whatever I got. Maybe help a brother out. I'm all about helping out the vets, but yeah, MOS. That's the. If you didn't know, what do you mean MOS?
Yeah.
Well, military.
Unfortunately, since he was in the military, he was not able to take any picture. He can't tell me where it is. He can't give me any information. But he sent me his picture wearing fatigues, and according to him, I proved to you that I was in the military. Now I guess I have to believe everything he says.
So he was guarding the Grand Canyon from
the objects, the cave, and the objects and all the Egyptian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, he can't give me any kind of proof or evidence except for his picture wearing fatigues.
That's too bad.
Reminds me of von Daniken when he said, if I remember correctly, on the History Channel, probably on Ancient Aliens, that the aliens that came here and brought their equipment to do all the work that they did, and then where is the equipment? Well, they took it back with them, of course. So now we can't, unfortunately. We just have to believe him.
Took their garbage, their shells from their food that they ate, the little bones.
Food. They took all their food.
Took all their food with them. Took their whatever they mated with them. I don't
pack it in, pack it out.
Yeah, there you go. They're very conscientious.
Take only photos, leave only pyramids.
That's the prime directive. If we ever have a real Federation of Planets, pack it in, pack it out is number one.
Leave a pyramid, number 2, on every planet. Interconnected. We need intergalactic pyramids. Okay.
You've been watching too much Stargate.
I know. I write it with sci-fi, so it's fun. But yeah, they have all these. There's never any proof. You see people; they'll say, we're a part alien, and all of this is like, okay, if we are part aliens, if aliens actually had fun, well, that means we have to be of the same species, because you can't have offsprings or viable offsprings. Plus, do the locks match the keys? Are alien? I mean, really, are they going to match?
What do you mean? I'm not sure what you mean.
With the locks match?
Could you elaborate on that, please?
Nope.
Could you elucidate what you mean?
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
I think that lock and the key is
because I think he considered that exact question, Mike. How did this mating mechanically actually take place?
Mm.
I feel like the Anunnaki people would say that there was genetic manipulation, but it wasn't necessarily, they weren't just getting down and having intercourse. They were in a lab somewhere.
So people who criticize Van Daniken will say, Van Daniken claims we had sex, and then his defenders like, oh, he didn't really say, he didn't mean that. He meant that, it was an experiment where they did some gene splicing, etc. No, Van Daniken explicitly says had intercourse with hospital beings or something very close to that. So, I mean, he really does say that. But yeah, I mean, again, it was Carl Sagan that said they did, it had better luck of us mating with a petunia and producing offspring than
it's related to the Bible thing where when the angels came to Sodom, I think. So I always ask people when we were having those discussions, why is it that the angels are always male and they have private parts like male humans, but they all live somewhere, I don't know, in heaven or something, but they are all males. So that's strange. I don't know. How do they use it over there, or we can only guess.
I don't want to guess.
That's probably written in the Templar secrets somewhere, how all that works.
I think the book title is When Angels Write Their Name in the Snow.
Yeah. Details.
No.
You people, so critical. I feel like I should get, those little air horns. So every time somebody says "looks like," Pablo's favorite phrase, I can just.
Looks like. Oh, yeesh.
Yeah, I feel like there's no real intent to come up with like an accurate story, because that's not the story that they want, because it's not interesting enough. So for me, pseudoscience or pseudoarchaeology is all about masquerading like it's pretend, which I think is what you're saying with cosplay, and like that's one element of it. Like that's why they wear the hats, because then this is what an archaeologist is supposed to like.
Yeah.
It's so dumb.
I think there's a lot to be said about the cosplay argument too. I mean, people are trying to escape reality when they cosplay to go to these conventions, and to some degree, I think that's a little bit about archaeology as well. From the consumer point of view, easy, fun, mysterious thing, significance and mystery are always. Every campfire story we've ever told, it has some sort of appeal to significance or mystery or surprise or that kind of thing. And archaeology can be freaking mundane. And to oh my gosh, it's just you're sorting artifacts all day long, and and they're not even really cool artifacts. They're just like flakes,
Nails
and shit. Yeah, so it can be mundane as hell.
Whiteware.
It's important. Yeah, whiteware. Oh gosh, don't give me whiteware. Is this whiteware or pearlware? Yes. Little things like that. Fun all day long. I've been in arguments between whiteware and pearlware, or is this a flake or is it natural? I get into that argument every day, all day long, just to break up the monotony.
Like those rocks that everybody's posting. This is a Paleolithic, whatever rock, and it's shows. I don't know. The last one was kind of cool though. It had a face on it, though I think they helped it along. But this is proof. See, I got a rock, and it looks like. It's a rock.
Yeah.
It's just a rock.
I think I've told you the story before. My grandmother had a whole front of her house garden filled with rocks that had faces in them. And she would see faces in them. Like, I don't think she thought they were real faces. She wasn't there, but like she was also really good at finding 4-leaf clovers and other stuff. Like her mind just worked that way. And like I get it. Like I see things too. But I feel like there's a lot of like there's a place past which it becomes like a mental illness.
Yes.
And like I don't want to make fun of people that have a mental condition, but at the same time that doesn't mean it's an artifact. And I understand like engaging with the public, but like ultimately like there are things that are wrong, and we need to gently tell people that they are wrong. Like when a guy comes into my office with a box full of rocks that has faces in them, like I'd say, you know what, I'm just not seeing what you're seeing. I'm sorry. I've never seen artifacts that look like this. I don't see anything that looks like it's been human modified on there. Sometimes they get upset. Sometimes they don't. They've heard it a million times before already, because everybody realizes that their rocks don't have faces in them.
Yeah. I got into a discussion with a guy on Twitter. I just finally abandoned it. I thought we got close to an agreement, and then I don't know if he sensed it too and decided to go immediately south or what, but he was talking about myth versus science, and how we can't call people racist because we ignore myth as well. And I'm like, well, number one, we're not really calling people racist. Yeah, some people are, I'm sure, but the ideas are racist. I don't think I explicitly said that in the Twitter exchange I had with him, but I did say these ideas about he was trying to say that archaeologists don't value the indigenous stories, the stories of indigenous peoples and descendants, and which is categorically not true. We don't necessarily believe them, and I admit that, but we don't just callously ignore them and discard them. and I couldn't make him understand it. And I think I've told him one point. I said, I mean, no offense, but you don't understand who archaeologists are and what motivates them, what methods and theories they operate under. I mean, this is pretty painfully obvious. And there's not a lot more we can discuss, but he brought up Non-Madal, the island out in the Pacific that has these very much like Gunung Padang, that has the hexagonal basaltic columns that they used to build with, and they were created. Well, according to him, and I didn't verify, I have no reason to believe it's not true. I'm sure it is. The story is that two brothers came to the island and created it with a dragon.
Ooh.
So obviously the dragons don't exist, so therefore archaeologists poo-poo it. Well, I told him, no, what's the citation for that? So he cited Non-Madal's Wikipedia page. No, you misunderstand. What's the citation for archaeologists poo-pooing this idea? That's what I'm interested in. And I said, well, let's go and look at one of the papers that are listed on this Wikipedia page. And so I pulled one up, and just at random, I mean, literally at random. I don't know if you believed it was at random or not, but I literally went down and said, Non-Madal, and I looked at the, archaeology, and I just searched for brothers to see if that story was in there. And sure enough, it was. And it basically said, and I think I could pull that up, but essentially what it was, the story said that, oral history holds that two brothers came to the island and created this. And it didn't say anything about whether or not archaeologists believe it, or whether or not it was true, or whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. We acknowledged it. And so archaeologists are acknowledging this oral tradition. And that's what I was trying to impart to them. We don't discount these things. We don't say they didn't happen. Even if we believe they didn't happen, we're not, we're interested in what the science says, and we share that. And some natives will say that, and agree with it, and some won't. But it doesn't discount. I mean, you can hold two thoughts. You can believe there's a scientific explanation and still value the oral tradition and the mythology. It still holds value because it may not be correct. It may not be literally true, but it does convey an idea of ethics and morality and history and tradition that goes along with it. It's important to that culture. And those are the important aspects, not whether or not a dragon literally created non-self, but what people think about that and the myth that surrounds it, the ethics and morality and the cultural traditions are what's important. And those are really important to understand. I couldn't get the guy to understand it at all. All he saw was, you keep calling people racist. I'm like, oh, dude, you're not racist. Sorry, I just bowed out of the whole conversation at that point. I was like, no, I'm not going to get anywhere with the guy. Oral traditions on Pohnpei say the island was settled by 7 voyages, with the most recent voyage bringing 2 brothers who founded the Sejur dynasty. And in the last 2 of the 7 voyages are said to come from the Katu Padi, which is translated as referring to a foreign land downwind west of the island. It's very interesting oral tradition. And, it does talk about where people come from and people moving. And so it's discounting it at all for taking it into consideration. There wasn't any mention of a dragon in there that I saw. So I'm sure that there, at least one of the oral traditions does include a dragon. But I don't know which one. I didn't see that one.
Can I say something controversial?
No. Yes. Yeah, please.
Okay, so me as I've been trying to find my identity, let's say, as a descendant of Native Americans. And it's difficult when you have the 2 versions, right? Like you said, like the oral history.
Yeah.
And then that you have to respect, and then you have the science. So I let's say, fortunately, grew up without being too attached, let's say, to the, because of circumstances and life and history, to the Native American, Central American oral histories and history. And I say that because that helps me not necessarily feeling attached to a story that says that humans were first created by the gods using wood or using clay or using that kind of thing. I can respect that and I can see it, but I know that it's not true. That first, that I'm an atheist and I'm a skeptic, and I'm not going to believe that there was a God creating humans. And that doesn't, in my view, feels or think, or I don't think that is disrespectful to the oral traditions of people from thousands of years ago, where they didn't have the tools or the information that we have today. So I don't, I understand, and I see Dr. Raff explaining how they have to deal with people when, for example, they have to take the bones of an ancestor and drill it to extract DNA and all that. I can see that. Like, if someone told me, let's say that we need to know that if your grandfather is your grandfather, or what was his ethnicity, so we're gonna drill a hole in his bone, or we're gonna take. I can see that, but in general, I would say that I wouldn't say, me personally, that there's any kind of racism to say that we don't believe, or that we try to understand in the context the stories that the ancestors of Native Americans are telling. I don't see, and I'm like, I wish there was. It's a conflict I have. Let's say when there are, we are guarding the human remains that could help complete the story really well and confirm that the Native Americans were the first one here, that helped understand the history of the peopling of the Americas and all that kind of stuff. And I, like I said, I grew up being a little bit detached from all of that, so I don't want to impose or think that I am the one who's right and other people who are also the same of Native Americans are wrong. But I don't. I personally feel uh, uh, fortunate that I grew up in a science environment, and that I can see that it's okay to accept modern science, genetics, uh, archaeology, anthropology, everything. It doesn't take anything from uh, the stories of the Native Americans of the whole continent. It doesn't diminish in any way, the fact that they were the creators of civilizations that are known all over the world, the most important in the world, that were civilizations like the South American one, that that started at the same time as civilizations in Egypt, for example, or in other places in the world. So that's my controversial statement. You don't need to accept this one.
I'm trying to find the controversy still.
Yeah, I don't see the controversy, but I see the dilemma you have. I mean,
Yeah.
embracing the science and embracing the cultural tradition. I don't think there's a controversy or a dilemma. I think you can do both. I mean, you can respect tradition and respect the traditions of people without, yeah, you may have to give up your own personal scientific curiosity at times. I can't just walk into somebody's kitchen and, take a sample of their food just to see what they're cooking with, because I'm curious. I smelled it on the street. I'm just going to go in. It's invading somebody's privacy, invading their space. And if I smell it on the street, I'm like, oh, that's a really wonderful odor. I can't just walk into the kitchen any more than I can just walk up to their descendant, their ancestors' remains, and drill into it and take a sample. I mean, there's no difference in my mind. Now, if I was like, oh my gosh, that smell is just wonderful. What are you cooking? And they invite me into their kitchen, and I ask, can I have a sample? And they give it to me, and that's something different. I've made a relationship. I've consulted with them, and this is a very different proposition. And yeah, I can satisfy my curiosity. And so I think that's the way we have to approach science when it comes to people. I mean, we're archaeologists. Yeah, we do hardcore science. We measure things, and we weigh things, and we look at things, and we test things. We test tensile strength, and we all this scientific stuff. We use geophysical stuff. We use different kinds of radiometric dating and all this blast things with XRF energy to look at the elements on the surface of an object. But at the end of the day, we're anthropologists, and people are at the center of that. And yeah, we look at dead people, but those dead people have descendants, and those descendants have to be considered when it comes to invading their space. And that's how I look at it.
No, I think it's a really complex issue, and I think all cultures, if there are cultures that don't do this, like, I don't know where they are, but like one of the definitions I remember getting of culture back when I was in undergrad was that culture is something that's there to resolve contradictions. So the fact that you can have a traditional belief system, or like the Bible conflicts directly with a lot of the scientific information that we now have about the natural world, and over time, like, the explanations in the Bible have been replaced by explanations that we have gotten through science or whatever. But that doesn't mean people still aren't getting something from the Bible. Like, I'm not a Bible believer. I grew up as a Methodist. Like, I understand it. I went to Bible school. I would probably call myself an atheist now. That doesn't mean that it's not important to a lot of people, and that we don't know how to respect that. And you can have multiple ideas in your head at the same time. Like, humans, I feel like, are just walking baskets of contradictions, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like I get it, and I feel like archaeologists they've done better lately, but the past of our discipline has been rough. Like, we have made a lot of mistakes as a discipline, and that comes from its colonial past and everything else. So I think we're learning some pretty hard lessons now. Not we as in the four of us here, but we as in a scientific community who cares about the past, because the past is super, super important for the present. And it's understanding the past is to serve the present. Like, it's about people, and it's about people who are alive now. And so I think we're at kind of a great pivot point. And I don't think some of these things will ever be resolved in the sense that one wins and one doesn't win, but somehow you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, I guess. And it's not, it's not easy. It's tricky.
Yeah, somehow you remind me of that time I went to Guatemala. One of the times I went to Guatemala, and I was so excited because the Guatemalan indigenous Maya person that we were, that was like our host there, she was going to show us Maya ceremony. So she takes us to this hill, and we get to the hill. The first thing we see is a tiny little chapel. And outside the chapel, there's this Maya woman sitting, selling candles. So she explained to us that the reason for that chapel was that if you are going to the ceremony with the Maya priest, then first you have to ask for permission to the Christian God to do the ceremony, which is to me it's a fascinating anthropological thing. But even though it's a Maya thing and it's an indigenous thing, I don't feel like I have to believe it, even though I'm part of the same ethnicity, but I don't share the same culture completely. Then we go to the Maya ceremony, And at the Maya ceremony, they are talking to the priest or to the shaman or whatever the name is. And what you can ask the priest is that if you have a girlfriend and there's another guy trying to date your girlfriend, then you can ask the priest to basically pray so that he can get sick or die or have a break a leg or something like that. So the whole thing is or if there's a woman that wants to take your man, then you can ask the priest, but you already asked God for permission, right? So it's it's I cannot believe on those things given the way I was raised and the things I know. So it's the same thing with the things from the past. Like I have to respect them, and I have to understand that that when some Native Americans are saying that we've been here, our oral history says that we've been in this continent always. There's no always. No, there are no human remains of anybody from always. It's like there are dates like that we have find them. There's DNA, there are objects, so we cannot say that we're here always. But maybe always for them was, since we remember, like there's no, we've been here all the time. So it's a matter of context and things. It's not, so and if someone like me, I don't, like I said, I don't believe in some of those oral histories literally, then that doesn't mean that I'm racist. I'm part of the same ethnicity, but I don't see what's the problem with not believing those things.
Like I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I think we all, not to say that your experience is the same as everybody else's, but like I feel you. Like I get it. And I'm sure Carl, you live in Kentucky. Sorry, by the way, but like when I go out and talk to, which I don't do much anymore, but like you go out and you talk to farmers or whatever, like you do code switching, right? Like you kind of you adapt their ways of speaking, and you don't have to say everything that you believe, even if you think they're full of crap or whatever. Like you're in somebody else's world, and like that's okay. Like we can walk in different worlds with the same shoes on. Everybody does it all the time.
One of the most common pieces of pseudo-archaeology I encounter in this part of the country is the art of witching and dowsing. Yes. And they do it for water, they do it for graves. And it's usually, for me, it's usually in connection with graveyards. And I got to admit, I do struggle with it, but I try very hard not to be totally dismissive. And I have to tell them, much like you with the folks that bring you a box of rocks, I have to tell them, I understand what you're saying, and this is not a method that we're able to base anything on. We can't make any decisions on this method because it has shown to be unreliable in controlled testing. And whenever we try to place controls on it to test the method to see if it works, it doesn't fall. It falls through. It doesn't work. And then usually the response is like, well, my family, my dad used to find water all the time with it, or he would use it, and ultimately it was always some version of counting the hits and ignoring the misses. Every time we had a hit, yep, we got it right there. And if we had a miss, it was just not even paid attention to. And I've seen it. We've gone out to cemeteries looking for cemeteries on properties that I work on a forest that has over 2,000 families were removed from this area to create a recreation area back in the 1960s. So like I say, you can imagine people living and working here all their lives from this late 1700s, early 1800s until the mid 1960s. There's a lot of cemeteries. People lived and died here, and we have 273 known cemeteries just on my 170,000 acres. And so there are cemeteries out there that I'm sure exist that are just lost to time. Nobody remembers where they're at. But, again, laying claim to the land, and descendants will come out and say, well, we witched it and we think there's a cemetery here and we want a sign put up that it explains that this is our family cemetery. And I mean, I have a hard time telling them I can't really go with, dowsing. We have to have some scientific means to determine that. And what I normally do is I go out with, believe it or not, a leaf blower, and I can blow the leaves off of an area. And grave depressions really stand out. I mean, they stand out, and people in the old days in the 1800s and later would put up field stones, a really robust stone on one end, and then a more gracile stone, smaller stone on the other end as a headstone, a footstone. And they almost always were oval depressions that face east-west. So those are really indicative of a cemetery when I find that. I find periwinkle, yucca, these plants growing there. So these are all scientific ways of finding them. I've got a potentiometer to measure the ground density. I basically a stick, I put it in the ground, and it gives me it literally shows me how much pressure I'm putting on it. In low density dirt in a grave shaft, the arrow is low, and then high density dirt where it's really difficult, the arrow goes up really high. And so I can put a numerical measurement on that, but I can also feel it with a tile probe. I can feel the density. Those are all ways to look for graves and look for consistently the grave shafts. We can also do bore. We can do bore holes. We can take samples of the dirt. We can do a trench across them. We've done that a couple of times, and we look for the grave shaft. You can see like a post hole. You can see a grave shaft in just the first 15 centimeters. You don't have to dig all the way to the grave. You can just see it in the first 15 and 20 centimeters. But the dowsing part, we can't rely on just that. And so I have to tell them that and break the news to them. And, sometimes they take it well. Sometimes, well, we witched it. We know it's there, and we're sure it's there. And I'm like, I need more to go on than that. And that's a good start. We can begin with that, but I'll need more to go on. I need documentation, something that was put in somebody's, maybe it was just written on a Bible. It was X number of steps from the house here, things like that. But we need more to go on than witching. But I have my own set of dowsing rods because I was pronounced a natural. A guy, let me use them in the field, and I stepped in a depression, and my body went this way, and the dowsing rods went that way. And he said, "Oh, you're natural." I said,
Carl the Natural Fegans.
I just stepped in a hole.
So when they were telling you they're witching or dowsing for graves, what are, like, when you douse for water, you're looking for water. My father also used to do it for oil and gas, but in other words, something has to be there. Are they saying the body, the skeleton? What are they?
They don't
focusing in on that you would dig?
I've asked that a couple of times. In fact, one guy I asked the question. I said, "So you can find water this way too?" "Oh yeah, absolutely. Find water all the time." I said, "Well, how do you know that you found water or a body?" And he looked at me, and the pause was a good 30 seconds, and then he just started talking about something else. And
how about those bears?
The cognitive dissonance was strong. I mean, and I didn't make fun of it. I mean, I make fun of it now. I kind of do. All right, a little bit. But at the time, not to his face, certainly not to his face. And I mean, and then of course, for people who believe in that sort of thing, I get it. I understand it. It's a tradition. It's been around a long time. And even Ivan Humes, I think, in historical archaeology in 1974, I think his book was, I got it on the shelf here somewhere. He's got a paragraph. He writes a good page and a half. He writes about dowsing and says the science is out on whether or not it works. In the 1970s, the science was out, right? So it might be, it's cheap and easy, just a couple of bent coat hangers. You might as well put that in your archaeological toolbox. I think he meant your literal archaeological toolbox, not a fair one. So, but that was the 1970s. So I would go for it.
This is a good seg, unless anybody has anything else to get back to Scott Wolter. Because you remember there was an episode where they did dowsing, and then it turned out later, and I think Jason Calavito had a blog post about this, where Scott Wolter admitted that like it was set up. Like they, in order to test the dowsing, somebody like threw their pocket knife in the grass, and then the guy went along, and then, he found it. But they, like, he knew where it was or something like that, but they wanted to get the shot. But like that's the credibility level of that program. Like that's what they did. Like they had to
I think a lot of these programs
dowsing.
Yeah. So there was an episode of Josh Gates with Expedition Unknown, where he was out west looking for the grave of Butch Cassidy. And there was an archaeologist featured on that. They were out digging. They said, well, they did ground penetrating radar, which, again, pretty much, it's like you said, cosplay, cargo cult archaeology. We're using real methods, but they don't really get the method. They don't get the theoretical underpinning of it. So like, we got some hit here. They didn't really. I don't think they really showed what the hit was, and how the radar really depicts something, but they had something. So they dug, and while they're digging, they're just mad digging a hole at a grave. I'm like, oh my God, it's not the way we would excavate this. I mean, maybe I might have a bucket pull the first couple centimeters off until I got to something I could actually start carefully looking for a grave shaft, but I don't know that I would be digging like mad the way they were. They were just throwing dirt everywhere and not looking at it, not sifting it. And then finally, hole, and they found and he was like, Josh is like, what do we do if we find a hole? Well, we got to stop, of course. And then they found a bone. Oh my God, what is that? It's a bone. And they cut to a commercial. They come back, and they of course, then they show the archaeologist. They have to call the archaeologist in, and they messed up and gave her name. And I emailed her, and I asked. I said, hey. When I saw this, I saw a chicken bone. Was I right? And she laughed at the LOL in her email. Yes, it was a chicken bone. And there was a longer. She had a segment. It was about this big in the timeline. It was like 30 seconds, and he basically asked a question. She said, "From this, no." That was like her whole segment. And she said, "Yeah, I had a much longer piece where I was talking about bones and archaeology and finding things." They cut all that out, and all they had was, "From this, no." Can you tell if this is male or female or man or beast? From this, no. And it wasn't even a chicken bone. It was something else. And she said, "Yeah, that wasn't even." They showed the chicken bone, but it was a different item that I was looking at. I said, "From this, no." So then they showed the chicken bone. He said, they totally edited things weird and in that.
You said a mouthful there. I have like several reactions. I'm gonna go through them very quickly because we are gonna run out of time. But first season of Oak Island, they did the exact same thing. They came up with some bone that was very obviously like some small mammal, like a raccoon or a cat or something like that had fallen down the well, and they made the whole big dramatic thing. So that's definitely in the playbook. I know Scott Wolter used GPR at some point on America Unearthed, and it was clear to me, like I've taught courses in how to use GPR. Like I couldn't do it today because it was a decade ago, but like I used to know that method really well. It was obvious to me they had no idea what they were doing. They also used GPR and dowsing. Wayne May, who's the Heartland Mormon guy, big into that. So this site that they're digging up in Iowa or wherever, he's out there with his dowsing rods, and I see him on his Hopewell sites in Ohio with dowsing rods. He just carries them around. And they get in there with their backhoe and they just keep on digging and digging. These people have absolutely no idea what they're doing and what they're looking for. They think because they have seen the cartoon version of archaeology in movies that they're going to have any clue. And I talked to one of the people from Oak Island after the sword thing, and he said, "What should we do?" And I said, "You guys need to like slow down and you're never going to find anything. Like that place is so torn up with all of the demolishing and the backhoes and everything else. And like people like me are never going to believe that you find anything, even if you do, because you have no idea what you're doing. And it's patently obvious to anybody who's watching. But it doesn't matter because they're cosplaying and they're trying to package it, and so it's just part of the shtick, and we see the same thing over and over again.
Definitely, the whole GPR thing. I see people talk about Gunung Padang. They use GPR. They use GPR here and there, and I'm sure people have seen GPR on an episode of Bones or Crossing Jordan. And they show the GPR goes over it, and there's a picture of a skeleton goes across the screen. That's not how GPR works.
No.
Not at
it's
all.
actually the most data intensive and hardest to process of any of the geophysical methods. Like if you're going over like a buried fuel tank or something where there's like an air cavity under the ground, like you can see it on the screen. Right. But if you're like trying to resolve things like grave features and stuff like that, like, I mean, people can do it, but if there's like a really good contrast and you have a skilled operator, but for the most part, that's not how it works. That's just not even close.
I don't know if you know, I probably shouldn't bring his name up just in case he doesn't want to be mentioned, but there's a guy who works in Ohio and Kentucky and different places, and the guy is skilled as anybody when it comes to GPR. And he was talking about looking for a city hired him to check a park. There was an old graveyard that was moved, and they want to see if there was any graves left. And he went through, and they were so old, it was hard to spot the graves. And what he did was he actually had to go through the data, and everything that looked like it might be, he put a little tick mark in on each slice. And that's what I try to describe to people with GPR. You basically you're running series of transects that are real close to each other, and each transect is like a loaf of bread. And you got a slice of bread that you create in each one of those loaves, and you put them all together, and then you use some software and you create a 3D image. But when you go through each slice, each radar down and up, it's sent down. I mean, I'm overgeneralizing, reducing it to something very describable. But a signal goes down, it bounces back up, and and there's a reflection in that. And then so on and so on as you go down your transect, and so what he would do, the images were so faint. Looking at the image itself, you have this one of the software that's really popular is GPR Slice. It takes all the slices and puts them all together, takes your whole transect, puts it together, and creates this 3D image that you can rotate and look at, and then you can spot things in it. But it was so ephemeral. The returns were so scattered that he had to go through and just each slice and put a tick mark next to things he thought might be a return. And then when he put it all back together, the ones that matched up for longer than 5 feet, 4 feet, whatever a grave might be, the length of the grave, those are the ones that when he matched them all back up again, they all stood out. And they created a pattern, and you could see the graveyard. And not a lot of people would have known to do. I would never have known to do that had I not attended that class and listened to him talk about it.
So these guys, you flip the switch, you go out there and drive around with your little stroller with a GPR on it, and you wave your hands around, and like people who know what they're doing watch that stuff and just go, "You guys are so full of it." Probably the same way that doctors feel when they watch like ER or Grey's Anatomy or something like that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." Like that's how I feel when I watch those shows, and yet they want to be taken seriously, and they get upset if you treat them mean. If you're mean, you say, "You know what, you're not doing it right." So I have a hard time caring about their feelings anymore, honestly.
We're so mean.
We are mean girls. So listen, guys, we got like 10 minutes left, and this is going to shut off. So if anybody has anything that you absolutely have to get in there, I feel like Carl and I talked a lot on this one. So if anybody has anything they've been dying to say.
I really did enjoy what Pablo had to share about, indigeneity and identifying, finding identity. I think it was pretty important. And it's pretty authentic.
I have more to say about it, but we don't have time.
Well, we should do a different, let's do one on that. I mean, that we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. Like Carl said, like 20 people watch it anyway, so who gives a shit? Like it's just,
we get somebody like Curly Tilapiawa on, or his buddy Ruben Ariano. I mean, one of those guys on, and I mean, those guys. That's their podcast. They talk about that sort of thing, and that'd be good to share with our audience and help. I'm sure a lot of people in the Fraudulent Archaeology Wall of Shame already watched the Tales of Atlantis or Atlantis, or as I'm saying
Tales.
Atlantis. Tales of Atlantis, Curly. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm sure they watch that. A lot of them do, but not all of them probably know about it. And I think that'd be a good way to share that. I mean, Flint has shown an interest in coming on here, and it'd be a good one maybe to talk about some of the recent issues in pseudo-archaeology that we've been encountering. There's 2 or 3 folks. Ken Fader would be a good one. He'd be a hoot to have on. Ken would be fun.
Yeah. We don't have to say anything if we get Ken on. Just let Ken talk. We'll just all just mute our microphones and just let him talk for 2 hours.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you guys? He has that series now on YouTube.
Yes, I've watched a couple of episodes.
I've got 2. Yeah, I've watched 2 of them. He has fun to watch because he's just I mean, that would be a fun professor to sit there and keep the kids entertained. But he gives all the information.
I started watching it today. I only got a few minutes into the first one, but I remember. So I knew of his book, and when I started writing a bunch of stuff about giants, I was kind of by myself. Like I didn't have any community wall, and he reached out to me by email, and he said, "You're doing God's work." And I didn't know that he had a sense of humor, but it's like it made me feel good. It's like, okay, Ken Fader notices that I'm working hard over here. So
I think he'd love an opportunity to hang out with us. I think.
Sure. Oh, one thing that we do have to say is Doug asked us to say that he wants to join us, but he obviously is in England and has some other issues. So we're going to get Doug Weller on here as soon as possible, as soon as we can schedule one. I'm sorry that came at the very end of the podcast, or we're not a podcast. Sorry, it comes at the very end of the video, but Doug is an important part of the equation, so we're going to get him on.
I think we can call it a podcast.
Do we have a pod? I don't know if I want to be a guy who has a podcast. I don't know if that doesn't feel right to me.
Podcast. We've been semi-regular, but Doug would be a great guy to have on. I think talking about Wikipedia and I think I'm pretty sure I remember Doug from back in the Usenet days when I was a kind of a believer and he was one of those skeptics. I'm pretty sure I remember him.
Didn't he? Is he the one who edits Scott Wolter's Wikipedia page? I mean, there's a thing there. We should. It's too bad he couldn't join us today because I'm sure he would have had some war stories. Yeah. I feel like I've heard Scott mention him, call him out by name for sinister things that Doug does.
The pseudo-archaeologists hate the guy because he won't let them just put irrational things on there without backing it up. I mean,
he's so mean. That's so mean. You have to let them keep their fantasy alive. That's important. It's important to them.
Damn evidence.
I'm very, very curious about how that behind the scenes work on Wikipedia works, because he can't be the only one taking care of everything. I have so many questions about it.
All right. Let's try to make that happen soon.
Sure.
All right.
Saturday is a good day for him, I think.
You said Saturday?
Saturdays are good days for him. Yeah, during the day. Before noon, probably, or close. It's close to noon or earlier because he's in Great Britain.
Right.
He's an expat in the British Isles. England.
Oh, so he's an American in England?
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, he was in England. I always assumed he was English. Never talked to the guy. So that'll be fun.
I think he's an expat.
Anybody have anything else? I see the countdown. We got 4 minutes here.
Come visit. I'll take you to the local distillery. It's right outside of LBL.
All right, you're on.
Jimmy's a real cool guy. He'll show you how the moonshining is done in the old days. He's legal. He's got a legal distillery, but he did moonshine back in the day. All righty.
Yeah, you guys are invited too. I'm going to invite you on behalf of Carl. You should all go to Carl's house.
Sure. Yeah, I have a bungalow. I'm in the biggest room in the house right now.
We'll bring tents.
Yeah, I'm up for it.
All right.
All right.
We'll do it. We'll do it live, and then there's no way it's CGI. See you later, everybody. I'm gonna hit end.
All right.
All right, cheers.